Welcome to Futureproof, where I nerd out about classic sci-fi staples and their real-world counterparts. I'm your host, Michael Swaim, creator of the Honest Ads series. That's right, true story. I wrote the first one about condoms. You know, bag you come into, dignified old man, juxtaposing, contrasting, humorous elements. I know it's silly, but I'm actually really proud of that one. Put those words on my tombstone, you know? I don't even care what order. Old man Michael Cum Bag Swaim? Fine with me. Speaking of cum, let's talk about quantum stealth adaptive camouflage. Forget everything I said before, we're starting fresh. As you might have noticed, quantum is a handy new word that means magical super science beyond the comprehension of a mere muggle. Before we unpack what that tech actually looks like, or doesn't, as the case may be, let's have a quick crash course in media portrayals of invisibility generally. Usually by media, I mean Batman and Batman-adjacent movies, shows, games, or comics that are trending on Google right now. But this time, I'm taking it all the way back to Greek myth. Pluto had a cap of invisibility that Perseus used to sneak up on and behead Medusa. I guess that's why Pluto disappeared from my map of the solar system. Oh, dwarf planet declassification burn. Another early example is the Tarnhelm from Wagner's seminal opera, The Ring of the Nibelung. Nibelung being the name of the king of the dwarves of Nibelheim, land of mists. Of course, his murderer Kratos is still at large, so please keep calling that tip line. The Tarnhelm rendered the wearer as transparent as the phrase, "I'm not racist, but," and is sometimes assumed to be the inspiration for the One Ring from Lord of the Same. To quote Tolkien himself, however, both rings are round, and there the resemblance ceases. Of course, by the same token, get it? You could compare the One Ring to Goatse, which as a comedian on the internet, I'm legally obliged to do. I also said seminal earlier. Feel like I should get some points for that. Funny word. Naturally, since this is ultimately a science show, we're slightly more interested in modern interpretations of invisibility, like the needlessly complex self-expanding projector system from Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and I guess to a lesser extent, 1959's Santa Claus, in which Merlin gives Santa an invisibility flower. Probably the first popular depiction of science-y invisibility was in 1897's The Invisible Man, an H.G. Wells joint first serialized in Pearson's Weekly, a British magazine whose stated aim was to interest, to elevate, and to amuse. Hey, same as my tramp stamp. ICYMI, which is a time-saving way to say I came by your missing information, huge giant Wells also wrote War of the Worlds, The Time Machine, and The Island of Dr. Moreau. He was basically an old-timey Philip K. Dick, and if you don't know who that is, you're a lost cause and I can't help you. That's right, I'm the gatekeeper! You can't have fun if you don't know enough of the specific made-up things that I know. I read all the lore, and I'm weaponizing that fact against you. I have no way to enforce my ethos beyond a shitty attitude! Women don't belong in games! Sony should make controllers you can only use with your hog! And turn the vibrate up while you're down there. Well, those last two I actually agree with, but mainly because I want to see everyone's hogs. Scientifically, of course. Point is, the Invisible Man relied on a serum, rather than Athena appearing as an owl or some shit. Flash forward to 2020, and the film version of The Invisible Man relies on the same concept we mostly use these days. A bunch of cameras pointing outward and projecting what they see onto the opposite side of a bunch of screens sewn into clothes. Famous examples include Predator, the car from Die Another Day, the cloaked cloaking device Quark and Rom carry in the Emperor's New Cloak episode of Deep Space Nine, the Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Halo series, Mass Effect, Metal Gear, XCOM. It pops up in video games a lot. And lastly, rounding out our healthy base of pop culture knowledge, I'd be remiss not to mention Goober, of Goober and the Ghost Chasers, the Scooby-Doo knockoff where the dog turns invisible whenever he's afraid to save money on animation. In real life, I'm afraid things aren't quite so simple. Tolkien sounds like Tolkien. Sorry, I just couldn't live with the idea of you not getting that joke. I've been like, inside this whole time. Okay, back to it. As you probably already know, we've had technology that bends light to make planes invisible to radar since the 80s. But equally obviously, if you're standing there looking at the plane and you can see it, that's not real invisibility. just like hoverboards aren't actually hoverboards. They're just wide segways with no handlebar. Next on the invisibility evolutionary ladder are systems like this one, developed by BAE, a Swedish defense contractor. It can change the way a vehicle or other large object appears to things like night vision and thermal sensors, either to disguise a target or identify a friendly. And yes, a lot of this tech is going to be military or military adjacent, because if anyone desperately needs to hide what they're doing most of the time, it's US Armed Forces. Oh, military-industrial complexification burn! Upgrading another level, like so many electrons hopping energy shells. See? I know science, f*** you. Covalent, motherfucker! Moving on. The next step in real-world invisibility tech has to be this adaptive camouflage from Folium Optics. You strap it to tanks and it makes them look like a pixelated version of their drab natural background. It's still not true invisibility, and it only works at a distance, but at least you can see it without looking at a screen or through goggles. And although our next contestant does also confound thermal sensors and other kinds of goggles, it does quite a bit more. The team at UC Irvine who created them are calling them invisibility stickers, or invisibility tape, and they're literally rolls of tape coated with an artificial protein that mimics the functions of octopi and squid skin. See? 2020's Invisible Man? Why make a weird inside-out camera suit to assault your ex-girlfriend? You could have just coated yourself in ground-up octopus skin. Invisibility tape is deceptively complicated to produce, involving what are called nanofluidic devices that allow scientists to edit proteins at the molecular level. Which is crazy, because the idea is that soldiers would use them disposably, slapping together a patch of invisibility tape to obscure their position, then leaving it behind and moving on. And yes, that's all very cool and sciencey, but it's not quite quantum yet. For that, we must turn to Canadian developer Hyperstealth, the stealth technology equivalent of calling your burger joint Mega Burger, which I guess is fine, actually. It sounds perfectly reasonable. Very Canadian of you, Hyperstealth. Rather than relying on molecular control of nanofluids, their stealth material is just a very precisely carved sheet of see-through plastic. It's a simpler solution on two levels. On the one hand, it's not recreating color patterns or mimicking something it's pointed at, it's transmitting the actual light bouncing off the background to the other side, making for a much more accurate look. On the other hand, it doesn't require us to mass produce sheet after sheet of squid tape. My God, the smell. But to reiterate my earlier and most pressing question, what makes it quantum? Nothing. As far as I can tell, it's just a marketing gimmick, which, does that mean all quantum stuff is fake? Like, is it just entanglement, computing, Ant-Man and the Wasp, mania? The totally non-quantum way the tech works is by creating a sheet of material composed of a bunch of tiny lenticular lenses, which is another way of saying hundreds of Ruffles potato chip ridges. Each ridge sends the light passing through it careening out at the other side in a specific direction, similar to the way a glass of water can shift something behind it left or right in space. But by angling the sequence of ridges very precisely, the fine people at Hyperstealth are able to create dead zones, where objects, even ones the size of a human, seem to disappear, while the stuff behind them still makes it through to your eyeballs. It still only works at specific angles and distances, but the application range is the widest so far. Lenticular lens technology actually required quite a bit of fancy math and optics and materials science to arrive at. But up until recently, it was used primarily in special glasses for people with extreme farsightedness. After that, those fakey holographic cards you see sometimes, where there's one image on one set of ridges and a second image on the other. So when you turn it, you see different stuff, you know those cards? After that, probably come morph effects and computer-aided 2D animation, then projections, then 3D TV, and then of course, the early color motion picture processes of the early 1920s, like the Keller-Dorian system, which allowed the production of color pictures from monochrome film stock. Unrelatedly, support Wikipedia, guys. Every donation helps. So donate to Wikipedia and find and apprehend Kratos. That's 2 calls to action. I guess I should obey the comedy rule of 3s and further ask y'all to toss me a like and head down to the comments to let me know what other sci-fi tropes you'd like me to cover next time on Futureproof.